In 2011, a professor was arrested after the bodies of 29 girls between the ages of 3 and 25 were found mummified in his apartment. Anatoly Moskvin was considered an expert on local cemeteries in Russia, but it turned out he was digging up deceased girls and turning them into living dolls. He blames his obsession to an incident in 1979 when the historian was 13 and even shared the story in a weekly publication dedicated to cemeteries and obituaries. In his last article for the publication on October 26, 2011, he claimed a group of men in black suits stopped him on the way from school one day when they were on the way to the funeral of an 11-year-old girl named Natasha Petrova, where they led him to her coffin and forced him to kiss the girl's corpse. He wrote, "I kissed her once, and then again and again." The girl's grieving mother then put a wedding ring on his finger and a wedding ring on her dead daughter's finger. He even said his strange marriage with this young girl was useful, more like insane. But then he said it led to a belief in magic and ultimately fascination in the dead. Whether the story is even true is beside the point, and his disturbing thoughts would go unchecked for more than 30 years. His interest in the corpse-kissing incident never left his twisted mind. With these horrific interests, he even earned an advanced degree in Celtic or Celtic studies, a culture whose mythology often blurs the lines between life and death. The historian also mastered 13 languages and was somehow a published scholar. Meanwhile, roaming from cemetery to cemetery, he said, "I don't think anyone in the city knows them better than he does, with his extensive knowledge of the region's dead." From 2005 to 2007, he claimed to have visited 752 cemeteries. He took detailed notes on each one and dove into the histories of those buried there. The hands-on historian claimed to have walked up to 20 miles per day, sometimes sleeping on hay bales and drinking rainwater from puddles. He posted a documentary series of his travels and discoveries titled Great Walks Around Cemeteries and What the Dead Said. He was a self-proclaimed expert on cemeteries and dubbed himself a necropolitist. One of his colleagues even called his work priceless. Too bad he took his expertise to unimaginable new levels. He even spent one night sleeping in a coffin ahead of a deceased person's funeral. Obviously, observations were more than just observations. Now, in 2009, locals began to discover the graves of their loved ones desecrated, sometimes completely dug up. Russian Interior Minister spokesman General Valery Gribakin said that initially their leading theory was that it was done by an extremist organization. They decided to beef up their police units and set groups of the most experienced detectives who specialize in extremist crimes. But for nearly 2 years, the Interior Ministry's leads went nowhere. Graves continued to be desecrated and no one knew why. Then a break in the investigation came following a terrorist attack at Domodedovo Airport in Moscow in 2011. Shortly afterward, authorities heard reports of Muslim graves being desecrated. Investigators were led to a cemetery where someone was painting over the pictures of the deceased, but not damaging anything else. This is where Anatoly Moskvin was finally caught. 8 police officers went to his apartment after they apprehended him at the graves to gather more evidence. What they found there shocked them all and shook the world. The 45-year-old lived with his parents in a small apartment. Inside, authorities found life-size doll-like figures throughout the apartment. The figures resembled antique dolls. Some wore knee-high boots, others had makeup on over their faces, which were covered in fabric that he also put on their hands. Except these were not dolls. They were the mummified corpses of human girls. When police moved one of the bodies, it played music. Inside the chest of many of the dolls, he had embedded music boxes. There were also photographs and plaques taken off of the gravestones. Doll-making manuals and maps of local cemeteries scattered all around the apartment. Police even discovered that some of the clothes worn by the mummified corpses were the clothes they were buried in. The music boxes or toys inside the bodies were so that they could produce sounds when he touched them. There were also personal belongings and clothing inside some of the mummies. One mummy had a piece of her gravestone with her name inside her. Another contained a hospital tag with the date and the cause of the girl's death. He admitted that he would stuff the decayed corpses with rags, then he would wrap them with nylon tights around their faces or make doll faces onto them. He would also insert buttons or toy eyes into the girls' eye sockets so they could watch cartoons with him. The historian said that he mostly loved his girls, though there were a few dolls in his garage that he claimed to have grown to dislike. He said he dug up the graves of the girls because he was lonely. He was single and his biggest dream was to have children. But the Russian adoption agencies wouldn't let him adopt a child because he didn't make enough money. That was definitely for the best, judging by the condition of his pack rat apartment and psychotic obsessions with the dead people. He added that he did this because he was waiting for science to find a way to bring the dead back to life. In the meantime, he used a simple solution of salt and baking soda to preserve the girls. He even celebrated the birthdays of his dolls as if they were his own children. His parents claimed to know nothing of the dolls. Elvira, the professor's 76-year-old mom, said they saw these dolls but did not suspect they were dead bodies inside. They thought it was his hobby to make big dolls and did not see anything wrong with it. Now, shoes in his apartment matched footprints that were found near the desecrated graves, and police knew without a doubt that they had found their grave robber. One corpse he kept for nearly 9 years. He was charged with a dozen crimes, all of which dealt with the desecration of graves. Russian media called him the Lord of Mummies. Neighbors were shocked and said that there was a rancid smell that would always come out from his apartment whenever he opened the door. But they chalked that up to the stink of something that rots in the basements of all the local buildings in town. Moskvin's editor, Alexei Yesin, didn't think anything of his writer's fetishes and said many of his articles enlightened his sensual interest in deceased young women, which he took for romantic and somewhat childish fantasies. He described the historian to have odd habits, but would not have imagined the mummification of all the young women and girls. In court, he confessed to 44 counts of abusing graves and dead bodies. He told the victims' parents that they abandoned their girls, and he had brought them home and warmed them up. Eventually, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia and sentenced to time in a psychiatric ward following sentencing. Although, as of September 2018, he was somehow allowed the opportunity to continue psychiatric treatment in his home. The victims' families think otherwise. The mother of his first victim believes he should obviously stay locked up for the rest of his life, and said this creature brought fear, terror, and panic into her life. She cried when she heard that he will have freedom to go wherever he wants. He should be kept under surveillance and insisted on a life sentence only under medical supervision. Local prosecutors agreed with the mom's assessment, even though psychiatrists say that Moskvin, who is now in his early 50s, is improving. Since his prosecution, several of his colleagues quit their collaboration with him, and his parents live in complete isolation because the community rejects them. His mom even suggested that she and her husband kill themselves, but her husband refused. Moskvin allegedly told authorities not to bother reburying the girls too deeply because he will simply unbury them when he is released. I still find it hard to grasp the scale of this sickening work and can't imagine what these parents went through and are still going through. Thanks for watching.